Okay, I think we can get started. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this informal drop-in session relating to the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare System application for the 2022 period. My name is Lynn Martinez. I'm a Program Manager of System Planning and Program Support within Children's Services. It's our pleasure to host you on this Friday morning during these very, very busy time. We understand you may be in the process of completing the application or haven't yet made a decision. So we appreciate the time that you're taking to be here, and we want to offer support to you during this process. Before we start, just a few notes. Right now, the microphones and the cameras are muted, but they will be unmuted during the questions and answers period when we're about to start that section. If you do want to, we would love to see you if you have the camera option available to you, but totally optional. We will record the session. We know this was sent on a very last minute notice, so we will make the recording available for those who couldn't attend this morning. A quick note on reference and acronyms. During the meeting today, we may refer to the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare System as the CWELCC. CWEL, I know it has different words in the community, but we've affectionately been calling it the CWELCC just for your ease of reference. And today's 1-hour session will be focused solely on the application process for 2022, which has an upcoming deadline of November 1st. In a week and a half or so 2022. And just a note also, there are a lot of unknowns, especially for 2023, future years, but we are here to answer your questions as best as possible. If we don't have the answer offhand, we will get back to you and get the answer at a later time or later today. I would like now to invite Jason Sabourin, Director of Children's Services, to say a few words, and welcome, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us at this session today. I wanted to take an opportunity to say a few words off the start, but I'll try to keep it brief so we can get to your questions, which is the most important thing, to try to clarify things for you. So obviously with the introduction of this new system and the provincial application deadline of Tuesday, November 1st, rapidly approaching, this deadline marks a significant milestone as we continue building on our vision for the future together, making childcare affordable for audible families. We've seen a significant increase in local providers opting in with the additional time and clarity for 2022 the province provided, and I think the memo this week for 2023 should help as well. Agreements are being signed, funding is rapidly being issued out to providers, and families are starting to receive their rebates and reduced fees. Actually, the other day, I received a survey one of the providers did with their families, and it was just amazing to see the impacts this is having on families. And this is really just life-changing for many families, especially those that struggle financially through the 0-4 years until their children enter school. Many of you here today hopefully have plans to opt in and by November 1st, and you may even be already working on some of the implementation plans and how to refund families within the provincial directives. My message, for providers who are still expressing concerns around the unknowns or future phases, or even receiving the 2023 details, is that, I do recognize how difficult this is on all of us. Children's Services has continued to advocate on your behalf to the province on some of these challenges, which is why I think we've seen, the memo this week to try to give some more assurances and different aspects, like them providing more time in 2022 as well. The province obviously released that information on Tuesday to give more assurances to providers of how 2023 is going to work, and to hopefully assist you with the decision to opt in 2022 to this new system, which more or less will keep operators whole from a financial perspective and give families these very important affordability aspects. We are still reviewing this most recent provincial memo, which states that their 2023 funding approach is designed to ensure consistency and stability for the childcare sector, and obviously continue that revenue replacement model, and that the existing childcare annual funding will remain largely unchanged. So we've had a lot of questions around WAG, right, the wage enhancement, that will remain unchanged for 2023. Funding allocations to support the implementation of the CWELCC system will be in addition to the existing annual funding, and use similar funding structures and processes as those that exist today. And we're obviously waiting for additional guidelines and anticipating to receive that in November is what the province has said. And obviously with how potentially big of transformation this is on the sector, building it in phases does allow us to listen, to collaborate, share concerns and ideas with the province, while also ensuring we minimize impacts to providers and services and ultimately build a public system together that we can all be proud of having a hand in Ottawa for Ottawa families. The future unknowns do pose challenges, but now is the time to put parents and families first. Children's Services encouraging all licensed childcare providers to opt in by the November 1st deadline. And the province wants me to reassure everyone that they will stand by us and support financial pressures and stabilize the sector. And I think that was noted in their memo this week as well around their approach for next year. And we'll obviously continue to support you and collectively work on the future unknowns together. We've accomplished so much in a short window of time through significant pandemic impacts as well. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment and patience during this ongoing period of transition. Our work collectively is not without its challenges. I know all of us are stretched and pressured and stressed and just trying to keep up the daily operations, but we are doing it so that we can enhance the childcare system and we all know how essential this is for families, for both the social and economic well-being of our community. I know at times the mountain appears high, but one step at a time and doing this together, we will ensure success of this system. So thank you for this, and back to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Jason, for being here today. And Jason will also be available during the question and answer period to answer any of the questions that you may have. So at this time, I also want to mention we have a few members of our Children's Services team that are joining us today in the meeting to listen to your questions and comments. The team has been working incredibly hard to ensure that all the sector partners feel supported through the transformation. And in the interest of time, we won't introduce everyone, but I would just ask if some of the team members want to turn on their cameras very briefly, so you can put maybe a face to a name. I know many of you have had some back and forth emails. They're monitoring the Children's Services inbox and the information coming in through those means. So thank you very much to everyone on the team. And if there's anything else that may be missing or that we could do as we get closer to November 1st, please let us know. They're here to listen. So if we can pull up the slide deck, it's very brief because we really want to keep a lot of time for questions. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of our role and some of the supports that are already existing to you. Thank you, Carolyn. So very briefly, the City of Ottawa, through Children's Services, is the Consolidated Municipal Service Manager, or commonly called as the CMSM. And Local Service System Manager is also the same thing, responsible for the planning and management of licensed childcare and early learning programs and services. For the CWELCC system, Children's Services is responsible to implement the provincial guidelines and establish local policies and procedures. We're responsible to implement an application approval process, enter into contribution agreements with approved childcare agencies, develop a funding approach, and make payments to childcare agencies, oversee and monitor the CWELCC system in Ottawa, provide reporting back to the Ministry of Education on the CWELCC system. And lastly on this list, but most importantly, to engage and consult with the childcare and early years sector for system planning. And also, we do have a service system plan that has been approved in 2019. It's a 5-year plan with strategic priorities. And the main goal in all of this, like Jason alluded to, is to ensure that all children and families have access to an affordable, high quality, inclusive programs in the city. So next slide. Please, Caroline. Merci. So this slide is just a summary. I think we've provided this in the sector letter also, but some of the communications that have gone out since late March to help with the application. I think a copy of the questions was distributed. There's many questions and answers document that have been provided that outline some of the questions that we may have. So we've been gathering them and providing them back to the sector to help support with your decisions. So if you haven't received them or you want to have more information, we'll be happy to provide that to you. So I'm going to, so 12, we're going to pass right away to the question and answers period. And I'm going to invite Dan Frate, a childcare program development specialist on our team, to host the Q&A period of the time. So thank you very much for being here. And I will pass it to Jason and Dan.
Thank you, Lynn. So as Lynn mentioned, we're now going to enter the question and answer period for the remaining amount of time today. So we'll be turning on the microphone video feature, which will take a few seconds to appear on your screen. And I'll ask Carolyn to go ahead and do that if you haven't already. A few reminders before we start. Please mute your microphones when others are presenting or speaking. You may use your video camera when speaking. Again, this is optional, depending on your comfort level. Please please use the raise hand icon to raise your hand, and we'll be going down the list accordingly. I'll have access to a list of who raised their hand in what sequence, and I'll be asking individuals to present their question. So in order to ensure that we hear from as many partners as possible, we'd ask that you ask one question with a follow-up question. So one question at a time with a follow-up question, and try to keep your questions to 2 minutes. But of course, if we have more time, we'll definitely entertain more questions. Any questions posted in the chat will only be addressed if time permits, and I'm thinking with 45 minutes, we should have more than enough time. We also have a team that's monitoring the chat, and so they may be providing links to documents as needed. So we look forward to be able to share any additional information that we haven't already. And any questions not answered or any additional questions can be sent to the Children's Services inbox, as we've been encouraging providers to do. So at 9:14, I'll open up the floor and for questions. And Jason and I, with the support of the team, will be supporting as much as possible. Currently not seeing any hands in the chat, but if you want to just open your mic and chat, you don't even have to raise your hand. Please, by all means, just jump in. If you have any questions, and or if you're more comfortable putting your question in the chat, by all means, drop your question in the chat. This is not a problem at all. Lynn, I'm not certain if maybe you wanted to provide a little feedback from our sessions that we've had to date, or while we wait to see if anyone has any questions, or maybe that'll help get the juices flowing, or Jason as well.
Yeah, I mean, so, just to remind everyone, today is trying to give you any clarity or answers that you need to hopefully opt in for families. So I know some of the questions we've been receiving, understanding this revenue replacement model, right? When you apply, our application is fairly streamlined. We need your average rates, which were basically regulated by the province, to be locked in on March 27th, 2022. So we're using that as the baseline to fund everyone based on your license capacity, to give you the funding that you need to reduce your fees by 25% for this year, and then cover that revenue loss for any parent that's in your care, and then to obviously reduce the fees going forward from that point. Obviously, the memo from this week from the province states that revenue replacement is going to continue for next year, which we were trying to encourage the province to do that, because they were at some points entertaining a new funding model for 2023, and we were cautioning them that everyone is too overwhelmed with just the daily operations to consider and implement this and try to get parents the 50% rebate for January 1st, 2023. So they listened to us, which was good. And so it was encouraging, actually, the way the numbers work out, that actually sees that parent fees are actually going to drop by an additional 37% for January 1st. And like I kind of said in my opening, I almost can't believe that parents are going to see that type of relief from a financial perspective. As someone who has just recently lived through 2 kids in licensed childcare, I mean, it's just life-changing for these families. So to bring it back to the provider angle, I know we've had lots of questions on, what about additional costs? Can I increase my rates? And those type of questions. Obviously, people can't increase your rates if you are opting into the CWELCC system. The province obviously has dictated that, but they are providing the funding to do so. They obviously referenced providing an inflationary increase for next year for the 2.75%. We don't have much details on that, but so they are looking at providing that on your overall budget to ensure that covers cost increases going into next year, which you would have, offset with fee increases in the past. Now you'll have that inflationary increase to do so to keep the fees dropping and giving the providers the financial security. We've heard, from countless people, additional concerns around additional costs. I do want to note for people that we are still working on 2022 aspects of the flexibility the province has provided us within the guidelines to ensure that any type of additional costs that were incurred in 2022, and if I can explain it simply, we often know many providers increase their fees in September. If you were planning on doing that this year, you aren't able to. So we know there's additional costs that, with inflation and the way the economy is right now. So we are working on those aspects. We do believe that the allocation we're providing and between a lot of us having vacancies in the system because of pandemic impacts and just the normal turnover, we do feel, there's the ability to do that. We just haven't worked out the final details of that. So I guess to explain a bit of our side, the province provides us an allocation. We have to work within that. So there's a few variables we have to figure out with like who's opting in, who's not. But we are encouraged by the ability to support people for additional costs in this year as they opt in, to make sure that that premise the province is going with, that providers are not financially impacted, is available for everyone. And then, like I said, that 2.75% for next year should help as well. So I mean, maybe I'll pause and see. I think I see some questions in the chat. I'll pause there and give anyone a chance to put their hand up, and I'll catch up on the chat.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jason. So we have a question from Karen, and it is, what is the percentage of Ottawa's daycares that have now opted in? Last we heard was 22%.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Karen. So, I mean, I'll be straight up with everyone. I mean, I'm not giving an update to that number until I update council on that. That's our elected officials. That's my board. So we are planning on providing an update to them after November 1st. What I said in my opening is very true. We've seen a significant increase. When that 22% number was presented, it was around September 1st when the province extended the deadline. And I think for me, what that number showed was how many providers were struggling with the day-to-day challenges and then trying to implement CWELCC. That's how many people weren't able to hit the deadline. I mean, we were in conversation with many providers, some of them crying because they couldn't, get all this information figured out and get their boards all together for September 1st. So which is why we continued articulating this to the province. So that allowed more time. And ever since then, we've seen a significant increase. And as I said, we're rapidly issuing contracts and funding out the door. So I do know that I think a lot of people are interpreting that 22% in that memo was that people weren't interested. I don't think that's the case. Like when we were talking with our advisory board that we have with the community members, it was not that, it was people needed time. So we've seen a significant increase. I'm just not going to be quoting numbers until we finish this process and update council on that.
Thank you, Jason, and I hope that helps Karen. Karen had a follow-up question. Regardless of what our rates are or our expenses are we to expect 25% of fees paid by parents since April 2022 to reimburse them back?
So I'll try to answer that, Karen, in the sense of, here's how I think the province has built their methodology, that your rates are a reflection of your budget, right? I think everyone kind of says, what are my costs? What do I have to collect to bring that in? So your rates are a reflection of your budget. So the way this revenue replacement works is, let's, for example, say that your fees are $60 for, your toddler program. This funding would reduce those fees by 25% down to, I think the math works out to 45. So that would be down. And then obviously this has to be retroactive to April 1st. So if parents were paying that $60 on April 1st, this funding is to go back to those parents for all that 25% discount to reduce the fees going forward as well. So that, come, let's say December, they're paying that $45, but they're also given all that money back for that 25% reduction back to April. This CWELCC money replaces it for the provider. So instead of it coming from the parent, it goes now, here's the money from the government, goes back to the parent. You're able to reduce your fees. And then very similar with the 37% for next year, it's going to be, okay, now take that $45 and and drop it by another 37%, and here's the money to do that. And then that's where I was getting in that explanation of, hey, wait a minute, what about the additional cost, inflation? I always increase my fees. So we have been articulating that to the province. They are giving us some flexibility for this year to look at that within our allocation to provide some flexibility for providers, which I said we'll try to get back out to everyone as soon as possible. And then for 2023, what made it easier on everyone is the province actually allocated an amount. So now we actually know we have the dedicated funding, whereas from a city perspective, I have to work within the allocation the province gave us for 2022. So we're trying to figure that out. But for 2023, they're giving that 2.75% to providers on their total budget is what I've heard. But again, that's what I've heard. We're still waiting for the guidelines.
Thank you, Jason. And I hope that helps, Karen. I believe I saw a third question pop in, but just quickly, I wanted to give, I believe it's Sarah, a heads up that we're at the moment, we're in the question and answer period of the session. So if you have any questions, you're either welcome to turn on your mic and camera and ask and or drop it in the chat. But we'll look at the third question that's come in from Karen, and then we'll jump into the tiny hopper question.
So Karen, I mean, I can answer that too in the sense of, like, let's not get into discounted rates, whatever the parent paid, you give them the 25% back, right? So if you've discounted or staff or whatever they paid. So I know in the application, and maybe the team can articulate this better, but we did ask for the average fees because we do know that there's all kinds of different fees. There's part-time fees, there's this, there's that. So we're asking what your fees were on that locked in date, unless it was pre-communicated to families. What's the average? We're going to give you that funding. And then on the reimbursement actual side, you have to make sure you're reimbursing the 25%. You obviously can't give more to any families. It's based on what they paid.
Thank you for that further clarification, Jason and Karen. Thumbs up and or if I don't see another question, I hope that's answered your questions around the percentage. So question coming in from Tiny Hoppers, and my rent is set to increase January 2023 and again January 2025. How will this be taken into account for owners to ensure we have enough funds, I imagine?
So great question, because this is what the biggest concern I've been finding from providers is around these additional costs. So for 2023, right, what the province has done in that memo from this week is said, okay, we are going to provide a 2.75% inflationary increase because we know costs are going up. So that can be used on anything, right? Salary costs are going up, food's going up, rent's going up. So that 2.75 is going to be allocated to providers based on your rates and dropping them by 37%, and then obviously adding 2.75. And as I said, what I heard from the province, I don't have it in writing because we don't have the guidelines, is that 2.75 is going to be based on your total budget, because that's what we are articulating. You can't just base it on, like, you know, for example, the 37% funding. You have to base it on the total budget they have. So that is encouraging that, you know, most people are going to get that 3% funding increase to help with those rent costs and whatnot. With association to 2025, unfortunately, don't know. I mean, what the province told us in that memo is they're going to be working on a new funding model for 2024. That'll allow all of us to consult with them, feed into it, give advice on how these type of things can work in this system, because it'll never sit still. We're always going to have to adapt the funding. So that's what we were trying to articulate to the provinces. Let alone the time it takes to implement, we also need time to figure out how this new system is going to be built. So I think they found a nice balance between this revenue replacement model and then obviously giving us time to build the new system.
Okay, I hope that helps, Karen. Thumbs up if you're good, and or please feel free to drop another question in the chat. I hope that helped. Not seeing any additional questions.
Dan, can I just add one more thing? I know
Absolutely.
we were talking about
Thank you, Lynn.
2023, 2025. Like, I think what we've tried to make clear is if in a later time you decide, okay, this is not for me anymore, there is the option of opting out. So you're not in it for the long run. I think what we're trying to do is get everyone on board for 2022 to provide the refunds retroactively, because I mean, it's a significant amount of money for families back to April. But down the line, you're not locked in for those years. I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lynn.
thanks.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's a very
Jason.
valid. No, I was just going to back that up in the sense it's a very valid point. There will be no penalties for anyone to opt out, because we do know, like we've heard, from a lot of providers, the uncertainties, the unknowns of the future is making it difficult to, for example, sign a legal agreement with the City of Ottawa that says I'm locked into this. So we want to, ensure people that, this is for the families for this year. Providers are whole. What the future brings, we will work that out with everyone. So if at any point when a provincial change comes up within the next few years, if it's not for your business, that's fine. We'll work out between everyone of how that works. So we've also heard some questions around our contracts and terms, and I think a lot of the hesitancy for myself anyway is because of those unknowns of the future. Like when the city says you're subject to provincial changes, everyone says, well, what are those provincial changes? And we say we don't know because the province hasn't told us. So we now have some information for 2023. We don't know anything for the future, but so there's pros and cons, right? To do and build this system, it is going to take time. So we need to figure out what those unknowns are throughout the years, but this is an amazing benefit for families. I'd also encourage everyone, when you opt in and fill in your application, obviously there's no legal requirement there. This is just what the information we need to start the legal contracts. There's still time for us after November 1st if we have to answer questions or help with implementation stuff. But obviously that November 1st date is very important because the province has set that date. So we need everyone to get that in. Then we'll have a bit of time, obviously, within the provincial directives to sign the contract, get the funding to you, and answer any questions about 2023 afterwards. So hopefully that helps as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason and Lynn. And I'll just share a comment, and I'll echo it because I imagine we've felt it on our end a couple of times as well. But she says thank you. And yes, the goal would be to opt in and stay in. Just hard. It's just hard that the future unknowns are so many for us. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a two-way street. I don't know, Tiny Hoppers, Bridalwood, if like we're listening, like if you want to tell us too what those unknowns, like what you're worried about, because what the province has been doing, like we meet with them very regularly. So this is what's important about building this system is we want to work with operators and work with the province to build it. So they're going to do obviously a bit of a consultation in 2023 as well to see what the future is. But I'm always keeping my ears open of what those concerns are so that we can then have those conversations directly with the province.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jason. I also want to welcome Jimmy. Jimmy, we're at the question and answer period, and you're welcome to turn on your video or your mic if you have any questions, and or drop a question in the chat, and we'll address it that way. We still have some time. It's 9:30 at the moment. We still have 30 minutes, so please don't be shy if you have questions. But okay, let's see here. There's a question coming in.
Yeah, Jimmy, so I can answer that. So if you opt in, we're going to give you a contract within days with your amount for 2022 funding. We at the city haven't received the guidelines or our allocation from the province. It's been a bit of my frustrations as well, like that we're so close to 2023 and we don't have that information yet. So the memo from the province spoke to that we're supposed to receive it in November. So we would be working very quickly to adjust your contract to give providers the 2023 amount that is required to reduce the fees by another 37%. I think what I've heard from the province is obviously the goal for all of us is to not make it retroactive like it was this year with parents waiting 9 months. But I'm also reflecting my concerns to the province that with you giving us the information this late in the year, it will be a significant challenge for all of us to potentially adjust all of our billing for January 1st. So, but that is the intention that we would sign on for 2022. Here's the money. And then very quickly after, when we have the information from the province, we would adjust our agreements to say, here's the additional top up for the 37% with the additional 2.75 inflationary increase provided as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. I hope that helps. Follow-up question from Jimmy. If the centers can't receive the reduction funding in time, we will have to charge parents the full fee starting in January, right? Question mark.
Yeah, Jimmy, I mean, I think I will leave that up to the provider to make their individual decisions on when they charge and whatnot. I mean, I know it's probably hard for me to say, well, the money's coming, and everyone to be like, okay, well, that's not good enough. So we are going to do everything in our power to get the contracts amended before year end. So this is my concern too with the province of, when you just tell people this week, now not only do we have to go back to April and refund parents 25% in November, December, we also now have to start adjusting our billing in December for January. So it's a lot of work in these 2 months. So I'm curious to see what the province rates and their guidelines around the objective. I think all of us want to give families the refunds as soon as possible, but you know, it'll be really dependent on what the province writes in those guidelines, similar to they've provided some direction for this year of when refunds have to be done and whatnot. But I did hear the province say they understand that not every provider may be in a position on January 1st to do that. So that made me feel like their guidelines may talk about, you know, some understanding that we may have to retroactively adjust January's, and then maybe everyone's in a position on February that, hey, we've actually adjusted fees by 37%. So that's the trouble with us not having the information of what they're writing in their guidelines at this point in time, but that's what I know at this point in time.
Thank you, Jason. And Jimmy, by all means, either a thumbs up or even just a message in the chat to say you're comfortable with the response. If not, we'll take it as though everything's okay. 9:33. I still, again, the chat's open, and or thank you for that. By all means, jump in. Let's see here. Oh, okay, here we go. So another question. Could you explain the wage floor funding and top-ups? Top-up funding. For example, if a REC whose current wage is $18 an hour plus the 12 existing wage equals 20.
Yeah, so you're going to test my program knowledge here on this one, so I may have to ask someone to either correct me or fill in the blanks. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe the floor is for people making under $18 an hour for this year. So if someone's making $17 a day, technically they could be eligible for that $1 floor top up to the 18. Then they're also eligible for the $2 on the WAG to bring them to the 20, which is what I think you were trying to articulate there. And then what the province released yesterday was there's also an additional dollar in the WAG in the wage floor in 2023. So they're trying to increase that wage floor up and up and up. And just so everyone is aware, I've continually expressed my desire for not so many wage programs throughout the years, that this is very complicated with working with multiple programs of what they do. So I do think that's something they're going to try to address in that new funding formula to make this easier on people. And team, did I get that right?
Yes, and just to take it a little step further, if the individual is already making the $18 an hour, he or she wouldn't qualify for the wage floor, as Jason was saying. But
yeah, so Jimmy, I don't think that's the case, because maybe, I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on explaining it, because I think based on my understanding, and please team correct me if I'm wrong, the wage floor has to come first, then the wage enhancement comes in. Then that's, so you can't say, well, the person's currently making $18 an hour plus the 2 WAG, so they're making 20, and then you want to add on $1. It's got to be the other way around, I think, is how the province articulated it. Was no, they're making $17 an hour, there's the hour for the floor, then the $2 for that. So it's complicated, though. I know this is the province doesn't make it easy on us for understanding these programs and then implementing them.
absolutely, and again, this session isn't the end of the road for for-profit agencies. You're always welcome to send your emails to questions to Children's Services if you find after the session you're still not 100% certain, and we can definitely either follow up with an email response and or a call.
And I guess I'll also mention too that the 2.75% increase on your total budget for 2023 can obviously be used for staffing increases as well for anyone outside of the WAG and the floor, right? We do know that some people have collective agreements and staffing costs that are increasing, so that 2.75 is that.
So just quickly further to articulate my colleague Maria's comments. So the wage floor is $18, including WAG. That helps further support the questions that are coming in. We did have a question. So the wage amount for 2020 is 18 without WAG. So just to answer Karen's question, Maria dropped a comment in the chat. I hope that helps. Okay. So it's 9:38. Oh, great. Another question. Fantastic. This is a huge issue still, as RECs already makes $18 an hour or more. The 2.75 will therefore need to go to so many things. So base amount is 16 plus 12 then for 2022. So Karen, your first comment, I imagine, did you have a further question on that, or I think it's just sharing a comment with the team and we appreciate it. It's recognized. But then the further question is, so base amount is $16 plus 2 then for 2022. I'm sorry, I'm not certain what you're referencing there. I'm not sure if Jason, if
Well, let's start first with the tiny hoppers one. So absolutely, we know the wage issue in childcare is the #1 issue between retention and recruitment. We've articulated that to the province many times. So we've said the same thing to them. This is still an issue, right? Having a wage floor is not going to help place more children, grow spaces and meet their objectives. We've also heard that as well. The 2.75 may not be enough. That cost, inflation, the economy may not be enough. That has been articulated to the province through even the different tables that I sit on as well. That's what they've communicated. So we can continue bringing those concerns back, but that is what they've communicated. So what I don't know at this point is, are they going to give us any flexibility within the allocation for next year to potentially help? But you can at least be rest assured that you're going to get that 2.75 as the guarantee the province has given us at this point in time around your total budget, 2.75 on top of that.
Thanks for that, Jason. And Jimmy had a comment. I don't think any RECs, even ECEAs, is making less than 16 now.
Yeah, I realize that too, Jimmy. It's I know that because of our allocation from the province is fairly low for Ottawa as well. So I think places like us in Toronto and stuff, the salaries are already above that. So it's potentially not helpful for many people because they're already paying that. So that's where the only other option available is the 2.75 increase for 2023 and the solutions that we're working on for 2022 to help people with making sure that that premise from the province that providers are not financially impacted by this QWELCC is kind of a live to.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. So a question came in from Karen and Maria, had the opportunity to reply to it. So I'll share it out loud. So base amount is 16 plus $2 then for 2022. So Maria's response is, hi Karen, so an employee making 16 plus $2 WAG would not be eligible for the $1 top up in 2022, as they would be making the wage floor, which is $18. I hope that helps, Karen, and thank you for that, Maria. And then Karen had a comment, validating and supporting Jimmy's comment that it'll be a couple of years before ACs will be getting the dollar top up, and the 2.75 won't cover the next couple of years.
Yeah, So I completely agree with everyone. We've continued to do that. Just Jimmy, on your thing, at 2.75 is just for 2023, right? So, you know, if most people were going to increase fees by 3% to cover kind of that's kind of the intention. We don't know what 2024, the future looks like as well. So that's the concerns we're bringing back to the province as well around this. And we've heard that from a lot of people that, you know, they are experiencing additional costs that the potential that the 2.75 is not going to cover. So what I would encourage everyone to do is, again, the province is listening. I think, you know, I think all of us have been challenged because of the timelines that it's put on everyone, but they are listening. So, you know, I would hope that you know, let's say there's a 1% difference, you know, if we could continue sharing those concerns with the province, they are potentially going to able to adjust their guidelines, issue more funding and whatnot. So as always, I mean, you can always reach out to your MPPs from a provincial level to make sure they're heard as well, but we are bringing everyone's voice back to our ability to talk with the province around the challenges that Ottawa is experiencing.
Thank you, Jason. Jimmy had a further comment around, so it sounds like none of these centers will receive the wage funding.
Yeah, I don't know, Jimmy. It's like there's probably like small amounts, because I think your premise was most people are paying more than the wage floor. So now in other parts of the province, I don't know. I mean, in the sense of there could be other areas of the province that are still lower, but I do think, you know, if you think about Toronto and Ottawa, where maybe salaries are higher, there's a good chance that not a lot of people are going to receive that wage floor top up because they're already above that wage floor.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. So our colleague Marianne has also dropped some examples from the provincial guidelines about the wage floor. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at that when they have a chance, because I believe after the meeting, you won't have access to the chat. So if you can take a look at that, and then again, we always reference the Ministry of Education August guidelines that have come in, and you can see some great examples that Marianne grabbed and dropped in the chat. So we have a question from Scott, and I hope that helps, Jimmy. Question from Scott, is the total budget for 2023 for 2.75 based on what was submitted in the application, or will we be required to submit a new one?
Yeah, so
it's a 2020.
Yeah, so let me back up so we have some context too. So the 2022 application, what's really important with this whole model the province has developed is your rates. And as I kind of said earlier, your rates are a reflection of your budget, right? You do your costing and what do you need to charge families. So the rates are the important piece that we need. So once we have those rates, we're providing the funding to reduce the 25% based on your license capacity. As we move into next year, same thing, your rates are locked in. Here's the 37% to reduce them by the 37%. Then the issues become from what we're hearing from providers of, well, wait a minute, I used to increase my fees in September or January 1st, and I have additional costs, which is why they're providing the 2.75. As I've heard from the province, they are basing the 2.75 in theory on your total budget. But I don't have the details from the province on what that looks like and how we're supposed to calculate it yet. My assumption is it's still going to be based on the rates, because the rates is reflective of your budget. And then it'll be, I think what I was trying to articulate earlier was it's not going to be based on like your CWELCC allocation to say, well, here's what you need for the 50%. It's going to be based on your total, you know, budget, in the sense of what's my rates times my license capacity to give that 2.75. No, there won't be another application to go through, and we may at times ask for more information. I mean, the province was probably going to do a lot of asking of information, to be honest with you, around developing their new model. I think they want to get a lot of understanding of cost methodologies and why, you know, these things are in developing their new model. But we're not going to ask people to go through another application process. We needed to do the application process for this year to lock ourselves into the contracts. The contracts are 5 years. We'll just adjust funding within the contracts based on upping the funding as we go through the years to say, okay, here's what you need to get to the 50%. Here's what we need eventually to get to this average $10 a day system.
So thank you for that, Jason. And I'll draw us back to the fact that when we're, you know, some of the questions that are coming in are obviously looking out to 2023, and we're doing our best even managing in 2022. So I'm just going to draw us back a bit to the 2022 2022 questions. I'm sure agencies appreciate all the feedback they're getting at the moment. Also
Yeah.
going to give everyone a heads up that, sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I just wanted to say, yeah, I think, we're trying our best to give everyone some comfort in 2023 when we ourselves don't know the information, right? So that's what's difficult. But I'm trying to give you guys some insight of what that memo means, so you have some comfort of opting into 2022. Jimmy, on your question on the 2.75, again, I don't have what the province is writing in their guidelines around it. My understanding is, again, like we're using the same terminology. Like, is it based on revenue or budget? It's again, I think it's based on your rates are a reflection of your budget. So they are going to use your rates as a reflection of how to calculate the 2.75 is my assumption, because that's how they're building this whole system. Then, so once we know that, oh, we need to provide you 37% to get you down, then it'll be okay. We'll use the total license capacity to kind of reflect that 2.75. I'm trying to give you guys as much guesses and assumptions as I have, because we don't have those guidelines yet. So if we could, like Dan said, try to get back to, I think this is why the biggest problem, I think, is people are asking about the future because they want the comfort. We don't have the ability to answer questions that the province is working on, but we're trying our best to give some clarity of what the memo even this week was, because we do know it impacts your decision of opting in. But to bring us back to the 2022 piece, you can always opt out in 2023 if you don't want the conditions that the province comes down with. So, this, which I know is tough too. I mean, I know it's tough on back and forth with parents. So I know it's a critical decision for this year, and that's what many people have been articulating to us. So yeah, let's try to bring it back to the 2022 pieces.
Beautiful. And just as a heads up, the information that Marianne had posted in the chat will be available on the chat flow. So you should be able to review that after the meeting. And further comment around, I believe, Yanufa, I mentioned your question was coming from Scott, but I believe Scott is your last name. So I apologize if I overshot that. So I'll go back to the chat to see, because there has been wonderful. So let's see here. Oh, there's more of an example from Jimmy here on the, I can read it out. So for example, our center revenues and budgets will be so different from 22 to 23 because we opened another 2 rooms in 22 and the rooms gradually filled this year. Therefore, the number of revenues and budgets for 2022 and 2023 will be huge. It will be a huge difference, excuse me. Is 2023 a new application or based on 2022? And I think you've answered that, but I don't know if you want to further.
Yeah, well, we can try again. So for 2022 in the application, right, we're asking for your average rates, and then we're basing it on your license capacity. So it's not even necessarily we're using people's budgets, because this is the way the province has built the revenue replacement model. It's whatever your fees were at that point. We need to know what those average fees were. We're providing, the initial allocation based on your total license capacity. So if you opened rooms during that year, you may not even need all this funding because maybe the spaces all weren't full in 2022. So we're going to share more information on what the recovery looks like around that if you haven't had parents actually in place, because this is around replacing the revenue that you would have brought in from parents. For 2023, again, we haven't worked out the details and whatnot. If there has been growth, I think the province provided some information around that. I think they told us that they're going to provide us, our funding that's needed based on growth that's happened in 2022. And I think they're going to come back with more information on what if someone opens up a new licensed location in 2023, because part of our struggle is we don't have the allocation from the province on that. So I know from my perspective, like, this is something the province needs to consider. When they license a new center, they should be providing us the associated operating revenue for that. So the 2023 pieces are something we're going to have to work through if there has been growth, but the intention would be, obviously, if the province licensed it, that we need to make sure the associated revenue is put in place to do that. I think you're on mute, Dan.
Well, I apologize for that, but I'll circle back to exactly what I was saying. So our colleague Marianne provided more detail around the information that she dropped in the chat is able to be found on page 33 of the August addendum. And a further clarification from one of our colleagues was around the fact that the memo we received was just that. It was a memo, not guidelines for 2023. So I don't know if you want to further stretch that one out, Jason, because basically memos of a heads up more or less, and the guidelines are really our operating procedures.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I think Jimmy, I think it's your comment. I mean, I share in the frustration because that's exactly what I said to the province. I said, hey, wait a minute, we're in November and you haven't given us the guidelines, and so we need the information to actually implement this. And you know, sometimes I always have to try to articulate to the province of, you know, they have to come up with the policy decisions, but then at the city level, there's an amount of work that has to be done. And then on the provider level, there's almost more work to then implement this from all your families and billing and refunds and stuff. So I've articulated that many times. I'm hopeful the guidelines give us the flexibility, and we will get that information out as soon as possible. They've told us November where the guidelines are there. It'll probably take us a bit of time to figure out how we're going to implement it and how we're going to allocate it and answer all these type of questions that are coming in around, is it an application? How is that? But we share in the, you know, the frustrations that this thing is being, you know, tight timelines on all of us. So that's a mutual feeling between all of us.
Thank you, Jason, and I hope that helps. I'm being mindful of time. We're at 9:52, so we have another 8 minutes. And just curious if any other individuals on the call have either some questions they want to drop in the chat or jump into the conversation. By all means, Jimmy, continue your questions. That's not a, I think it's helping everyone, to be very honest with you. It helps us as a city to plan on what we need to be communicating for future growth and future information around the CWELCC. So thank you for that. And I'm sure it's helping your colleagues here on the call as well. Because we are recording this session and it will be shared. So there will be some benefits for sure, for sharing this information.
And I'll just mention again, like obviously, again, I know the issues are the lack of clarity. The provincial memo is the only information we have on 2023 at this point. So I would encourage everyone to look at that. I mean, again, from my perspective, they are more or less mimicking 2022, right? Where this is a revenue replacement model. They want the money to go to the families. They want the providers to be held whole, you know, from a financial perspective. They don't want this to come at a cost. So between 2022 and 2023, we have that clarity. I know everyone wants the details of like, well, how do we implement this? When are we implementing this? That's what we're waiting for from the province. But there is that added clarity that we were asking for the province, because we were hearing it from many people that they said they want to know what 2023 looks like before they opt in. So that's why you got the memo this week, because we knew how important it was to give at least some level of clarity of what 2023 looks like. And like I said, I think for me, the biggest piece is it gives us time to assess this thing. So we know that 2022, 2023 are pretty stable for the sector, and then we can work on what the future looks like for 2024.
Thank you, Jason. I was just reading some more comments provided by Jimmy Jason. So I will just go through the second comment I believe I'm on. Thank you for your explanation. It's just 2023 is only 2 months away, and we need some clarification for that new year. Sorry, I have to keep moving some information in order to see the chat. The center has obligations by participating the CWELCC to reduce fees dramatically soon, but there's no certain terms of the government in a very near future. Please present our concerns to the province and feds. I think Jason has mentioned that he has been and he will continue, but I'll let you jump on that one, Jason, as well.
Yeah, I'll jump on a couple of them here in the sense of, you know, we do have details for 2022, right, around the obligations of CWELCC in the sense of once you sign the agreement, there's a certain amount of days for us to sign the agreement, and there's a certain amount of days for providers to get out the funding to parents. At this point, we don't have any of the details or the conditions for when families are going to see that 37%. I know the province at a high level has spoken about the end of the year, but they also haven't given us the details. So I think that's what I would be explaining to parents. Like, if you are going to opt in, here's what we know for 2022. We're waiting on the details for 2023 as well, and you know, empathize with the frustration from families who have been waiting for this as well. Tiny hoppers, I completely agree. This is a leap of faith. I mean, I said that right from the start, that without the unknown. The only thing I would say, I've been in childcare for, I don't know, 5-6 years, and everything I heard from everyone was, the need for, a true public system, like a school system where everyone has access and it's free. Like that's the dream, I think, of everyone when we think about our kids. This is the first step of that. And so while I know it's hard and there's lack of clarity, this is the start of what an amazing national Canada-wide childcare system could be as we get to, let's say, $10 a day. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be significant transformation. And I continue to try to articulate to the province too. They have to understand that the operational capacities of the providers, are stretched thin right now coming through a pandemic. Just focusing on the daily operations, we need time to build this with them. So while it's a leap of faith, I completely agree with that. This is, the dream of everyone of trying to build this public system that could really benefit everyone. And then on top of that, what everyone's raising too is the wage issue, right, for the staff. Like if we actually truly want to build a system, like that has to be the first thing they do. And we continue to bring up that issue every single time we talk with them. So I think I've hopefully.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Jason. Final comment, it's recognizing that it's 9:57 now, so the memo looks good. This is from Jimmy. The memo looks good, but nothing in the actual contract. I think that's why a lot of childcare providers are still so concerned and hesitant. Maybe as a final comment, Jason, and a final outlook on this whole session.
Yeah, so I think, Jimmy, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think what people are looking at are agreements. Like when you actually have a legal agreement in front of you and saying, oh my God, I have to sign this, but why isn't the details there? Trust me, if I had the details, we would give them to you, right? That's the complication. So I know many people are looking at the city's agreement saying, well, what does this mean to adjust to provincial changes? I want to know what I'm legally agreeing to. That's the complication, is what we try to articulate to the province. Like, so what you are legally agreeing to for 2022 with the money is what right? Like we said, like if you ever don't like the provincial changes, we will work with everyone to make sure there's a smooth process to opt out. There's no penalties or anything. We don't know the details either, but I would share them obviously with everyone if we had them. So I think we have to try to disconnect the legal agreement to that we're giving you money in 2022 for a specific purpose, give money back to families. For 2023, we will always have the ability to work with everyone if they have concerns about the provincial changes to kind of smooth it out and figure out a solution to do that. So, but I have heard that many times that people are concerned about our city contract when there's so many unknowns. And really the root cause of this for me is that we don't have the information to share as well from the province. The only other side I will say is it is going to take a significant amount of effort to build this system. And so, I don't think it's even fair to the province to kind of say, well, tell me what this system is going to look like in 5 years, because it's so complicated. That's the one thing in childcare. It's complex and it's going to take a lot of time for us to figure these things out. And I truly believe if we do this together and we're listening and collaborating, we can build a public system in Ottawa that is just to be dreamt of for what it could mean for our families. So I'll try to wrap it up there, Dan.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jason. And thank you for everyone who participated in the call today. So just in closing, my colleagues and myself, as well as Jason and our team, we would like to thank you everyone for attending today. Please continue to send your questions to the Children's Services inbox, and we'll do our level best to address any questions. I hope everyone has an excellent day and an amazing weekend. And we do thank you for all the feedback, and we'll be sharing this video, and I'm sure it'll be helpful across the sector. Have a great day today.